Well, for further perspective and analysis on the G20 and Africa, I'm joined here in our Nairobi studios by political and economic analyst David Owiro. Welcome to Africa Live, David. It seems this year that African nations are playing a much greater role at the G20 Summit. We've seen both China and Germany pushing for further engagement for Africa within the G20 community. Just tell us why this is certainly a positive step for Africa.
Yeah, this is a positive step because for the first time, I think world leaders such as Germany and China recognize that, in a global context, through globalization, there's enough for everybody. And so globalization will give, a win-win situation for not only developed countries, but also developing countries. And so for Africa, this is important because of course, not only do we get to articulate our policy priorities within the global leadership, but also as developing nations which don't often have a chance to, attend these global trade policy making forums, such as the G20, of course. You just sort of opening up global policy making it more democratic, enhancing the voices of Africa.
Indeed. Well, of course, and as you say, globalization important for both developing and developed nations. But of course, of late, we've seen that US President Donald Trump does not agree. It seems that protectionist is the move that is the sort of state to which he's moving towards. How do you think Africa might approach this issue at the G20 summit?
I think there's a consensus in terms of the benefits of globalization. Of course, for a populist, the populist policies that Donald Trump went into power with assure, of course, just a short-term benefit, but in the long run, protectionism hurts the economies. And if you look at it in a way, because his is just a focus on increasing domestic jobs in the US, enhancing income levels and so forth, those only benefit in the short term. And so if you think about it, what ends up happening is you have a closed economy with high inefficiencies and high prices within your domestic market. And so the contrast of that is through globalization, and Africa might be poised to not only benefit from integrating to the global economy, but also connecting to global value chains. And so being able to tap into the best of skills and technology that's available, and also deploy them in generating whatever industrialization or whatever manufacturing that they're doing.
But of course, some might add to that Africa's development is at the mercy of an ever-changing climate, an issue that, as we know, will be mentioned quite strongly at the G20 summit, and one hopes to see Africa push its agenda on this regard very strongly.
Yes, I think climate change is one thing that Africa is sort of at the receiving end, because of course we know the largest contributors are the developed world, and yet the adverse effects of climate change is felt in Africa. And so when you talk about perhaps severe droughts and so forth, Africa being a largely agricultural economy will be the most affected. And so the hope is that, despite the stance that the US, which is the leading contributor to, climate or carbon emissions, being, having a sort of belief that climate change doesn't exist. I think Africans can take solace in the fact that, the second largest contributor, China and India, are still committed to pursuing this climate change deal. Of course, the biggest risk was that given the policy stance of the US, then the whole pact would unravel, the Paris Pact would unravel. But we see a commitment from global world leaders that, other countries will step up given the withdrawal by the US, but also we are seeing a stronger commitment that this is actually the way to go for our futures and also to safeguard the globe within we live in.
Well, it's certainly encouraging, as you say. Well, thanks very much to David Owiro, a political and economic analyst, joining us here in studio for a look at how the G20 may impact on Africa's agenda. That's where we leave our G20 coverage for now. Let's take a short break. There's still more ahead.